What if I told you that trauma isn't just something that happens to you, but something that can reshape your brain, your body, and even your sense of reality? The scariest part? Most people don't even realize they're living in the aftermath of it. In this video, we're diving into the shocking effects of trauma, why some of the safest places on Earth talk about it the most, and how it might be influencing your life in ways you never imagined. Stay with me. You won't look at trauma the same way again.
If you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or like the wounds from your past still hold you back, you're not alone. This space is for you. Here, we heal, we grow, and we rediscover who we truly are. Beyond the pain, beyond the past. And if you're ready to step into your healing journey and finally embrace your authentic self, hit that subscribe button. Because your inner child matters, and together, we can rewrite your story. And before we dive in, I want you to affirm this. Drop "I am healing" in the comments. Let's remind ourselves, and each other.
I think trauma has always been central to our lives. What's intriguing to me is how the discussion of trauma wasn't central before. And I was on some other webcast and somebody said, "Dr. Van der Kolk, why do you think there's so much more trauma today than there was before?" And I said, "Do you know anything about history?" Actually, there is less trauma today than before. And it is when people start feeling somewhat safe that they start being able to actually talk about it, that safety is not an ordinary condition, that people have always lived in terror and fear and disasters. What's also interesting for me is that the countries that are some of the safest, most civilized countries in the world are the countries that have done most work on trauma. Places like Norway, where nobody kills anybody ever, or Australia or Holland are places where people really know about trauma because it's so extraordinary. In the American South or in South Africa or Middle East, exception of Israel, people don't talk about trauma because it is so part of the fabric of life. But for me, it's amazing that as I was growing up professionally as a psychiatrist, that nobody talked about child abuse, and nobody talked about rape, and nobody talked about family violence. It's an unseen topic. In the history of psychoanalysis, people never talked about it. And how did people get to be so blind? Mainly because it was so ubiquitous. I think there was too much of it. And now that we actually have, some people actually have good lives, that we can say, interesting, how do people get to be so crazy? That we actually start being able to look at it. So the study of trauma comes out of complex social political factors, but it certainly did not start with understanding children and women, which of course are the main trauma populations, but it came out of studying soldiers, which is another curious thing. Everybody still talks about soldiers as the big trauma population, but of course that's not true. The big trauma population is abused children, women in domestic violence situations, and those people don't get a lot of attention. We are primates. I learned from monkeys in the zoo. We are monkeys, and our brain are monkey brains, and we live with other people. We have brains in order to do what you and I are doing, talking to each other, comparing notes, explaining things to each other, and that gives us pleasure and meaning. If you or I go to spend a month by ourselves not talking to anybody, we can do it and we'll be sort of heroic if we do it, but that's not our nature. Our nature is to yak and to hang out with people and to do things together, and that's what we have brains for. And when you see little kids, I happen to have some tiny babies in my life these days, they are by themselves and they just need to be taken care of. But as you see a kid develop, it becomes more of a member of a troop and learns how to talk and interact and adjust itself. But we are troop people, and one of the things that trauma does is it separates you from the group, and it becomes God-forsaken experience. And the Psalms are good about it, but the response to trauma is, I'm all by myself. And the healing of trauma is indeed about feeling you're a member of a group. Maybe a 12-step program, or a survivors program, or a terrorist gang, but some sort of way in which you can reconnect with other people where you feel like I'm a part of something larger than myself. Mm-hmm. But the trauma experience is the opposite of that, is I'm all by myself. Yeah.
Trauma has always existed, but people are talking about it more now because they finally feel safe enough to do so. Surprisingly, there is less trauma today than in the past, but many of the most vulnerable, like abused children and survivors of domestic violence, still go unnoticed. Humans are wired for connection, yet trauma isolates us. Healing starts by rebuilding those lost connections. Safe environments, social support, and open conversations are key to recovery.
There's a thing in America where, American school children take more and more tests because they find that kids in Finland and in Korea score so much better than American kids. And what they don't know is that in Finland and Korea, kids actually sing and they play and they have recesses and they do what kids are supposed to do. And our response in America is to do less and less play, to do less and less singing, to do less and less stuff, and to tell these kids who are all frozen because they watch too much television and see too much violence at home, to have them sit still and to take tests, to compete with kids who actually don't have homework, but who are naturally curious because they feel safe. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How can you not see that? Anybody who hangs out with kids, when kids feel safe, they play and they explore and they do stuff with each other. You don't have to worry, is my kid going to learn something? Because we are naturally curious human beings. Most people enjoy learning stuff. You don't have to. I never needed to be like, do your homework. I was a curious kid. Our sense of aliveness is based on our body sensations. And that to what degree you get turned on, like my window that you can't see is looking out over mountains in the valley out here, and I see that, and it's almost fall here, and it's beautiful, and I feel the tingling all over my body looking at the beautiful thing see in the window. When you're traumatized, your sensations also run the world, and that's surprising to me again how that's not front and center when people talk about trauma, is that the issue, being traumatized, means that you have heartbreaking and gut-wrenching sensations in your body. And the first person who I know who really talked about it, aside from Shakespeare, is Charles Darwin, who wrote a book about that. And you feel it in your body, and your emotions are sensory experiences. And if you feel terrible, and most of us have felt terrible in our lives, so we know that is you feel it in your chest and you feel it in your abdomen, and it's unbearable. So as an adult, if we have heartbreaking experience, we tend to quickly solve it by taking a drug, taking your Prozac, taking your alcohol, doing something to make those feelings go away, which is quite troublesome actually. But as a kid, if you have continuous heartbreaking and gut-wrenching sensations, you learn to shut down your own body and to ignore and to push away those feelings that are very much in the insula and the periaxial gray. We really understand these circuits in the brain quite well these days. And when you shut that down, you stop feeling. And when you stop feeling, you start feeling dead. And when you start feeling dead, your life has no longer any meaning. And you have no self-compassion, and you certainly have no compassion for other people either. And you feel nothing. And then, if you feel nothing, then maybe playing violent computer games may give you a little bit of a sense of pleasure. Or hating people who look different from the way you do gives you a sense of aliveness, because you cannot get it from growing flowers in your garden or playing your piano, because that's too mild a sensory stimulus. And to go back again to what happened in Germany and Japan, I don't know what happened in Cambodia, and I don't know what's happening in India right now, But Germany was a very traumatized country between the two world wars, and people were scared to death. But these angry, hateful people make you feel alive and help you to no longer feel that internal sense of helplessness and deadness inside. And so to overcome trauma, you need to wake up your body again. You can really take pleasure in the small things of life. And that's very much what we do in our workshops, is to really help people to just notice your feelings in your body. A lot of people find that very scary, actually. One of the hallmarks of traumatized people is that the television is always blaring, there's always things sitting in the ear, and they put things in because they feel so dead inside, and unless they put a lot of stuff into their sensory system, they shut down and feel like nobody.
Yeah, right.
And the whole world, nobody and somebody, is fascinating. How did English evolve that way, that somebody is different from somebody? But of course, you are somebody, you have a body, you are a person with a body, and if you're a person with a body, you are somebody. And if you're a person who doesn't have a body, you are nobody.
Trauma isolates, but healing happens through connection. Understanding its effects is the first step to reclaiming your life. You're not alone. Healing is possible.
Healing takes time, and you don't have to do it alone. If this message resonated with you, know that your journey matters. Be gentle with yourself, keep exploring, and surround yourself with support. If you haven't yet, subscribe and join this community. We're in this together. And before you go, comment, "I am healing," to affirm your growth. You are seen, you are valued, and you are not alone.